faith in action. And so we wanted to ask them just a couple of questions so they could help us understand more about their beautiful ministry down there. So welcome, Stephen and Mary Doss, to us here. So let me just ask you a couple of just very basic questions. First of all, tell us about your ministry, what it is you do there.
Okay, Mary and I, we've been doing this for 7 years. I think before, I know sometimes people often ask me, say how often I go to Brazil to do this ministry. And I think there's a confusion. So I want to make sure that people understand that Mary and I actually live in São Paulo. This is our home. We don't have a home outside of São Paulo. We live here. And São Paulo is a big city, and we live near what we call the old center. And for some reason, the old center has always historically been the place where there's a lot of homeless kids, homeless children. And ever since the pandemic, the number has grown increasingly, but usually there's about 200 to 300 in the one's area. But we actually know, because it's just Mary and myself. And so we just have a contact with maybe 30 of the kids, and that changes a lot. And I was saying about the thing about these children. They live in the streets. That's their home. Most of them go to the streets at a very young age. They come from different backgrounds. I mean, all of them mostly come from very extreme poor families. The class.
They're not runaways because no one's looking for them.
Yeah, they're not runaways, which is another concept. No, they're just homeless. They're actually, so in the streets, they develop, they adapt, and they also develop their identity in the streets. So sometimes we work with, when I write in my blogs or something, we write about someone that's 20 something, 25 or even 30 years old. They're actually young people who had grown up in the streets. So they spend their whole infancy in the streets. So they develop their own mindset. They constructed their own idea about relationships. What is the whole world concept comes from the streets, which is why a lot of psychiatrists and psychologists cannot work with street children, because they don't have any kind of foundation to work with them. And for us, when we went there, one of the things that hit us over the years that we discovered that these children are just sons and daughters without parents. And their parents have neglected their duties, have rejected them for whatever reasons. And we try not to pass judgment on the parents because that's irrelevant. But the most important things for us to know is that these are sons and daughters. And so when we go in there, we are actually offering ourselves. God has given us the opportunity to be parents to these children. And as parents, you are not, most parents would know that you don't know everything about your children, and there's not a necessity for them to tell you everything about themselves. But as a parent, they need, children look to parents to help them navigate in this world. And so our role is, as parents, is to teach them to put all the things they learn in the world, like their ideas about God, their ideas about relation, the ideas about the opposite sex, about living, all these things. We have to help them understand and process that. We don't try to impose on them, but we allow them to come with these ideas and share it with us. And we allow them to process that together. So our ministry, this is why we've been there 7 years. And I would say after 7 years, this is where we are exactly where we hope to get to 7 years ago. So right now we are where we feel like we can start doing something more concrete, more solid. And it took us 7 years to get to this point.
Well, that's the interesting about parenting, is that it's such a time relevant thing for both parent and child. And I know that there, as any parents would know, that life is difficult when you're raising somebody or helping someone get through something. So, but there's also going to be those really great moments of joy when you
Yeah.
see that one of your kids has made a breakthrough in some way. And I know that there is it Philippe, that
Yeah.
Yeah.
someone who has
Yeah.
kind of broken through that ceiling, and there's, tell us
Yeah,
about.
well, the interesting thing about Philippi, when we met him, now Philippi has been in the street since he was 8, but when we met him, he was about 15 or 16 years old. And Philippi is a very, he's always been a very gentle soul in the streets, which was one of the things that really kind of um, got our attention, because it really opened our eyes to see that someone could just spend their whole life in the streets and still maintain the purity. I mean, he was a real pure, innocent soul. And so Philippi, and a lot like him, it's not just Philippi, there were several other teenagers like him. They became the point where they taught us about the power of God, the love of God, the grace of God, that actually, regardless of the miserable situation they find themselves, these children have a lot of moments of joy. And I think that one of the, when someone asks what we gauge as success, we gauge as success when the kids can look back and say, yes, it was horrible to live my time in the street. There were a lot of times that was terrible, but there were a lot of times there was joy. There's a lot of times where God brought us. We saw God's face. We saw God's love expressed through the other kids, other people, and they say, "Oh, even God brought us there." And one of the recently I asked, well, we just had this really open conversation with Philippi, and I asked him, say, "Would you change anything in your life?" And he said, "No, if I change something in my past, then I won't be where I am today." And I think that's success, where someone is able to say, regardless of what I went through, I find that I'm actually happy. I know that God's been with me. And I think it's more than just make believe. It's just more than whatever sometimes people say it's just a psychological thing. No, these kids are actually expressing this a real experience. One of the most beautiful things that Philippi shared with the other kids once, they jumped on a train, those wagon trains, and they went down to the beach. Of course, the train didn't go all the way, so they had to jump off the train and hike through forest. And they went through a place and they saw these beautiful birds. And the boys all decided at that moment to stay, be together and give thanks to God, to pray together. And that's a very powerful thing. And I think this is the thing, as parents in the streets, these kids have a lot of precious stones to share, and they don't have a parent to listen to them, to receive this precious gift that they have. So I think I mean, I think that would be, for me, in our mind, those are success more. I don't think there's a successful thing. There are many successful moments where the kids come to understand God's love,
presence.
God's presence.
Mhm. What a beautiful story. I mean, it goes to show, and I think you said this earlier when we were talking, that God was there before you all got there 8 years ago. And
Yes.
you're just bringing some experiences and some joy and the knowledge. I know you do Bible studies with them so that it helps them maybe look for those bits of light throughout their lives.
I think that the Bible studies help in a sense that it's a mutual sharing. So I think right now our relationship with the kids is at a point where they feel like they can share something and they know that we value it.
Mhm.
And it's really been a blessing. In fact, most of my blog postings about things that the kids actually have given to us, and I think that's one thing. I think one of the most important thing in any ministry that the church does is that our ministry should humanize the people. that we serve. There's a lot of charity work that does kind of dehumanizes or doesn't promote the humanization, if there's a word, of the person we serve, because we think we are the givers and they are the receivers and that's it. But in a human relationship, there is an encounter where
Yes.
you both give and receive.
Mhm.
And I think so in our ministry is to make sure to help the churches understand that we want the churches through us to have encounters with these kids to receive from them what they have. They have a lot to give.
Mhm. Well, you're receiving from them is really giving to them. And see, I think that's how God really works. You
Yeah.
Yeah.
think you're giving something, but you're actually receiving. And it's in that exchange, in that love exchange is where the Spirit meets us. So
Yeah.
it's so
Yeah.
beautiful. So what can we do? What can all saints do? How can we support you?
Well, of course, the obvious one is finance. So I won't. That's so obvious that I won't go on talking about that. I think the most important thing, actually, I would recommend is that the people participate with us through the reading of our postings, because the kids know that I write about them. And in fact, well, it's kind of different because we worked with street children in 93 to 99 before. And then this is our second time working with them. Back then, there was no Facebook, there's nothing. And today, kids, even they have Facebook, so they are friends. My friends on Facebook. And when I post an article about, they know that I write about them. And I think it makes them feel like, well, some actually they are somebody. In this world, they are nobodies. In the society, they are not even considered as people.
They like the fact that people in Florida pray for them. Like we had one kid
Yeah.
before the pandemic, when we were able to get a lot of mail, and he would get a postcard from a lady from the church in Florida, and then he would run around and show it to shop owners
Yeah.
or magazine stands. See, I got something, from Florida, from another
Yeah.
country, and he was really proud of that. But they like the fact that, oh, there's somebody in another country that thinks about me, that prays about me.
Yeah, and I think also like when people read about in the blog about our sharing, like sometimes we have intense period with one boy, sometimes with another. It changes over the years, like depending, and we just go with the flow. Like I say, everything is really dynamic. We don't control the encounters that we have. And I think when the churches or when people read about the blogs, they participate in it too. It's not something that, in fact, I would recommend not to just give to contribute and then just feel like, oh, this is just one really thing to contribute to, but actually to participate through the reading, the participation, and like I said, this is a dynamic ministry. So through the reading, sometimes people can get moved and touched to participate in a more concrete way. And the opportunities come up. I can't really say specifically because we work with each kids as themselves. We don't have a rule to apply on for everybody. And like Philippi, for example, like someone that lives here, which is actually by coincidence my childhood friend from Singapore, is the ambassador in Brazil. So, so just a coincidence. So he heard about one of the Philippi, and so he wanted to help. Philippi lost his job when the pandemic had started, and then so my friend wanted to help financially, and so he gave not a big but a donation, but it's big for Philippi. So I asked Philippi, I just received this, what do you want? Do you want me to give it to you? And he said, no, you keep it, and then just give it whenever I need something, you can just give it to me and we divide it up. I don't want the whole sum because I don't need it. And I think it's kind of like great, So, but then it's in a way my friend felt moved to help Philippi in that way because he was connected to him. But I think people can be moved. But what we really want is the people to be participating in with the kids, and also through the reading of the blog is actually one of the most concrete way. And then after that we will see how, because it's a dynamic ministry, so people, it moves, it changes, and,
Right.
and later on people will find ways to participate in that.
Tell me what's the best way for people to get the blog?
I usually send, I have an email mailing list I send whenever I update it, but I try to do, I'll do at least 2 postings a month. I try to do every week, but that cannot be, but it's on my blog.
What is the address for your blog that I could give our parishioners?
Okay, it's one word, smmercyministry.com. Sorry, spmercyministry.com.
www.
We can try to put a link on the, we can put a link
Yeah,
on
we'll
the
put a link to
website
that.
with that. You know, just wrap this up, but you know what I'm hearing here, Stephen and Mary, is just this idea of relationship. The fact that you've been there for 7 years has shown the kids that you're invested, and I find it interesting. 7 years, it seems to be like the number for when a group will really begin to fully trust completely the person, and then you asking us to read the blog. I mean, that once again, that's relationship, to develop a relationship with these kids and with the people there. The fact that you and Mary, you're in this together, it's that relationship that makes this ministry going. And so I think that's just been probably the biggest takeaway for me is with ministry, listening to you today, is the importance of relationship.
Yeah, actually, like even in the streets, there's different organizations. I mean, we are São Paulo Mercy Ministry for Florida, the Diocese of Florida, but in the streets, we're just Stephen and Mary because we don't have a name. Yeah, they just go in and they say, oh, Stephen and Mary. They call us Uncle Stephen and Auntie Mary. Yeah. So, and we actually over this purposely have made it that way. We're just Stephen and Mary. We're not an organization, we're not anything, we're just Stephen and Mary in the street. And you're right, it's that relationship.
That's great.
So I want to thank you and Liz. Thank you for putting this together.